Good evening, everyone. Mr. President, thank you so much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you on this panel with your esteemed guests. If anything, the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum is again and again proving itself as a pivotal platform for the discussions around global economy, global trends, and geopolitics. So there is no better time than now than being here and discussing what we are going to discuss after listening to these speeches, one by you and the rest by your esteemed guests. Thank you again. Thank you so much. And this is a very interesting panel if you look at the structure of the panel. We have China, we have Indonesia, very important country from the ASEAN, we have Russia, we have Bahrain, a very important and vibrant GCC country, and then we have South Africa, which is a founding member of the BRICS. And still some people would say Vladimir Putin is isolated. So I don't know if this panel says something, it says how multipolar the world has become. I'd like to start with President Putin. The overarching theme of this year's forum is shared values in a multipolar world. This is a very, very high, ambitious ceiling. What does Russia bring to the table in that regard?
In fact, I tried to bring this across in my intervention. I think whatever Russia is doing is aimed to bring together the efforts of all partners or friends, all those who are willing to work with Russia to address those global civilizational tasks. And first of all, we seek to achieve a balanced global development, so that this development is aligned with the interests of as many countries as possible. We seek to build a multipolar world order where the participants of international relations agree among themselves, design instruments and tools that would help find solutions even in the most difficult of conditions. Such solutions that would benefit everybody and not just individual groupings or associations, be it military or economic blocs. I think that today's meeting, today's event, that as is known as arranged by Russia, it aims to achieve this.
Sometimes, Mr. President, this effort to build the multipolar world seems like more of a resistance of an existing order rather than a genuine, consistent, coherent effort to create the multipolar world that you're talking about. Is it an objective-driven effort, or it's only resisting current, unfavorable kind of order?
I think, and on many occasions, the different locations, I mentioned this, the changes are happening irrespective of whether we help those changes or not. Those are objective trends of global development. In my speech, many other occasions, including here at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum last year, I mentioned that the changes in the world are happening, and those are fundamental changes. They are due to the fact that new economic leaders emerge. Just look at what's happened over the past years. Look at how the share of the so-called G7 was shrinking in the global economy. It is shrinking every year. And look at how the share of the countries that got together in the BRICS has been growing. Again, this is an objective process. And it has nothing to do with any clashes or military conflicts. No, it's been on for decades. And when we're told, look, you in Russia, you implemented this pivot to the global south, to Asia. Oh no, those decisions had long been taken because we consider the trends of the global development. And again, those are objective trends. Our colleague from South Africa just spoke. 2.5 billion people in Africa. And again, this is the medical fact. This is what's going to happen. And there is no stopping it. All those nations, all those continents, all those peoples would seek to improve their standards of living. And definitely they would try to enhance their economic and humanitarian capabilities. And again, those are inevitable things that are happening in our civilization. Our task is to make this process, this inevitable process, a civilized shape. And altogether we should take efforts that not only would accelerate those processes, but make those processes balanced, so that the decisions are made on a timely basis, and the decisions are most effective and would benefit all the participants of the process, including the countries that, one way or another, are somehow losing their positions in the global economy. Look, we want to agree with them. We are ready to agree with them if they want to. However, if they want to maintain their monopoly at all costs, if they want to keep the instruments of colonial influence in the world, well, they will have to be happy with the situation they are gradually sliding to. Now, whatever we are doing at the national level, for instance, given our domestic and foreign policy, and together with our friends and partners, this is what we're doing.
Let me bring the conversation from values to closer to the conflict areas in the world. President Putin, Israel said that the statements are normalizing the fact that a country might kill the president of another country. That's basically the conclusion of last week's statements. Yes, Ayatollah Khamenei is not head of state, but he has enough gravitas to be considered as head of state and to be protected by the articles of international law. But when we normalize the idea, no matter where you stand on Iran, when we normalize the idea of a country killing the president of another country publicly, and what kind of new rules are being set, they are obviously contradictory to the kind of values you're trying to put forward, isn't that?
Well, you know, I was listening to my colleagues speak. I was taking some notes so that later I could react to that and make some references. I've also made note of what you were just saying yourself. And you said the following. When we've been discussing it with my colleague from the People's Republic of China, you said the following, and I wrote it down. The Russian Federation and China shape new world order. Russia and China are not shaping the world order. We are only identifying the potential shapes of it, or the scope of it, or the general perimeter. The new world order emerges genuinely on its own. It's just like watching the sunrise. There is no way you can run away from it, or you can avoid it. And we are trying to create the conditions, or rather pave the way for this process, so that it is more balanced and so that it is in line with the interest of the global majority. And we very much hope that all of the countries would be aware of it, and after all, would come to realize, as I was saying earlier, that this particular wave of searching for a solution is better than an approach where you try to apply pressure. And in fact, this neo-colonial world order, and I do believe that it is neo-colonial in its nature, this is the world order that humanity has existed for many hundreds and even centuries of years.
Would you allow, Mr. President, to go back to the question about normalizing the talk about, a country killing the president of another country? In the case of Iran and Khamenei and Israel within this conflict. I mean, it seems that those who are making the new values are not the global south, not obviously not Russia, not China, it's the Israelis. Are you comfortable with that?
Мне бы очень хотелось, чтобы такие вещи, о которых вы сказали, оставались на уровне
I
риторики.
really would like the statements that you just cited to stay rhetoric, but can you please be more specific? What exactly do you mean in terms of Israel?
I mean, the new values now is that one country is setting the rules for another country that who has or doesn't have enrichment, for example. One country is threatening to kill the president or the head of that country. Are these values defendable in any way?
Well, first of all, I don't see anything new in this regard. It's no new to us at all. And secondly, the Russian Federation has always, and I keep emphasizing that, has always supported taking care of security and safety of each single country without damaging safety and security of any other country. That's our strong principle. So my response is that in general, it may sound as a generic answer, but I promise this is a very practical approach executed by Russia.
Allow me for a very direct question about the situation. Donald Trump is seeking what he calls the total surrender of Iran in terms of the nuclear project. Would Vladimir Putin seek the total surrender of Volodymyr Zelensky in the same vein?
First of all, it's not the same thing. It is a very different situation. And secondly, we are not aiming for unconditional surrender by Ukraine. We insist that Ukraine recognizes realities that we have on the ground.
President Putin, on a more practical question concerning the crisis in the Middle East. Now, we will talk about Ukraine in a while. But the current crisis, it touches on geopolitics, energy, and it has repercussions that go beyond the parties involved in the struggle. Is it a test for how the South can play a role in mending the fences between both countries, in putting some good imagination around the solution, architecting a solution that can be acceptable by two parties that are fighting, head to head? Is this a test for what you are proposing and trying to create as political weight for the South?
Yes, I do believe it is quite probable. And the reality is that many countries of the region in a way, do have sometimes stable or sometimes complicated relations, but anyway, relations with both of the parties, with both Iran and Israel. And the availability of those ties and relations give us reason to hope that global South as a whole and countries of the region in particular may exercise their impact on this process in a way that the acute phase of the conflict comes to an end. When I was saying that the principal position of the Russian Federation is to make sure that the security of one country is not paid at the cost of other countries, well, I'm not going to dwell into the details of that. We all understand what I'm talking about. We're talking about uranium enrichment on the one hand, and this is Iran's right. It is Iran's right to peaceful nuclear program. On the other hand, we know the position of Israel. Israel insists that it is about provision of its security. But I'm sure that mutually acceptable solution can be found for both sides. That's my view. And both the countries of the global South and especially so countries of the region have a positive role to play and impact this process aimed at the search of solution. I do believe such a solution does exist.
Actually, today, the Russian ambassador at the UN said that the only way forward is a political solution for the nuclear file between Iran and the Israelis. Is there any preliminary points about this solution, or we're still too far from that?
Well, in such situations, I would say it's always better not to rush in order not to harm the process. But in my view, there are potential points of consensus. They are available. We are expressing our position to both sides of the conflict. As you know, we are in touch with Israel. We're in touch with our Iranian friends. We do have some proposals, including our potential participation. But I'd like to pay your attention that by no means are we trying to act as a mediator. No, we are simply expressing ideas. We're making suggestions. And should those ideas seem attractive to both sides, we would only be happy. But I'd like to reiterate that we're in touch with Israel. As you know, just a while ago, I had a conversation with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I also had a conversation with President of Iran. I also talked to the President of the United States, who is undoubtedly directly involved in the process. We shared our vision. We discussed the potential progress in resolution of this conflict. Well, we'll see. We'll see. So far, our proposals are also being discussed. We are in touch with our Iranian friends on a virtually daily basis, so we'll see. But I would really like, among others, our ideas to be implemented.
How is the war in Ukraine reflective of the values that St. Petersburg Forum is trying to put forward, to defend, to underscore?
Very easily. Directly, in fact, there is a direct relation to what I've been talking about. I said that security of one country cannot be ensured at the expense of security of other country. And since the beginning of the 1990s, for decades, we've been hearing that there would be no NATO's expansion to the east. And we've had 5 or 6 rounds of expansion. Despite all our calls not to do this, those were ignored, and definitely those are rudiments of the old, if not to say ancient, neocolonial policy, well, upgraded, of course, given the current context, but nonetheless, this is the action from the position of power. Those are the actions that do not take into account the interests of Russia. As to Ukraine, again, this is action from the position of power, whatever was happening there. It is a bloody anti-constitutional coup that happened in Ukraine. And again, this is acting from the position of power. In previous U.S. administration directly stated that they spent billions of dollars to support the coup. Well, obviously, it was not mentioned in public, but still. And our action aimed at protecting part of the population that considered that it had cultural and historic ties with the Russian people. I'm referring to the people living in the Crimea. And then there were some attempts on our part to resolve the situation in the southeast of Ukraine, in Donetsk and Luhansk. We made these efforts, but again, our, in this case, ideological opponents, as I could label them, attempted to act from a position of force. They started military operations in Lugansk and Donbass. It was not us who started the military operations. And after the coup, the part of the Ukrainian population rejected the outcomes of the coup and rejected those who made this coup happen. Well, they became targets of the military operations. We attempted to address the situation in a peaceful manner, to somehow mend the situation, but our partners, quote unquote, well, it turned out that they started this whole coup just to pump up Ukraine with weapons and to continue combat. In the end, this forced us to recognize independence of the two republics. Look, it took us 8 years to do this. We tried to negotiate, but we were forced to recognize their independence, and then we started supporting them, including providing military support to put an end to the war unleashed by our opponents in the West. And those who they lean upon in Ukraine, those are neo-Nazis and ultra-nationalists. So whatever that is linked to this tragedy unfolding in Ukraine is not an outcome of our action. This is an outcome of the action of those who are not ready to embrace the global changes happening in the world.
Mr. President, I'm in no position to challenge the narrative you put forward. Let's say this is the baseline of what the reality is. Let's assume this is the reality. Your army is advancing beyond the 4 areas that are considered Russian by Moscow. So what's your end game? How deep is your army going to go, and for what effect?
Вы сказали по поводу областей.
You said about the 4 regions that we consider ours. Well, on many occasions I did mention that Russian and Ukrainian peoples are the same people, and in this sense, the entire Ukraine is ours. But look, we look at the realities on the ground, and obviously there are people, there are many of such people in a neighboring country who seek sovereignty and independence, and I wish them all the best. I mean, we never, ever challenged their right, the right of the Ukrainian people to independence and sovereignty. Having said that, the grounds on which Ukraine became independent and sovereign were spelled out in the Declaration on Independence of 1991. And it stated very clearly that Ukraine is a non-nuclear neutral state and not party of any blocs. I think it would be good to get back to those core values based on which Ukraine obtained its sovereignty and independence. Second, from the very beginning, when the conflict became really hot, we suggested to the Ukrainian leadership to cease all the conflicts. We suggested that we withdraw our troops from the territories, and they withdraw their troops from the territories where people are not ready to embrace the new regime and they want to live independently or become part of the Russian Federation. They said no. And again, those are not political decisions. And now the logic of combat comes into play. The military look at where they can better advance, where they can channel their troops to achieve the best outcomes with lowest possible casualties. And this is how troops advance. You know, we have an old saying, or story, or rule rather, whenever the boot of Russian soldier stands, it becomes ours. Look, I would hate the statement to be over-militaristic or be viewed as over-militaristic, but at every single stage of the unfolding process, and I stress this just for you to understand, and this is truth. I mean, at every single stage of the unfolding process, we suggested to those with whom we were in contact in Ukraine, we suggested to stop. We suggested that we should negotiate, because this purely military logic may result in a situation when the whole thing would aggravate, and we will have to negotiate starting from worse positions. And this happened several times. I would not go into detail now. And the witnesses to this, to our suggestions, are active politicians from other countries, and thanks God they are alive and healthy. But whenever we suggested something, they would go from Moscow to Kiev and then would tell us, look, they tell us that we are agents of the Kremlin and we wash our hands. I won't deal with this. So each time we heard no, no, no. And we said time and again, let's do it, let's negotiate. It's going to be worse for you. No. Why? Well, because those who are guided by old neo-colonial principles, including and primarily Europe, they thought that they would crush Russia, would destroy Russia, and would feast on it. That's exactly why, and I'm confident, and that's exactly why former Prime Minister Mr. Johnson, and I think this happened due to suggestions by the former U.S. administration, Biden's administration came to Ukraine and suggested that they should not reach an agreement with Russia. But the agreement was on the table during the Istanbul negotiations. So we reached a consensus on almost all issues, and we had just to finalize the document. We had just to meet with the head of the regime at that time and put an end to this process. But now, Mr. Johnson came and, with the support of the then U.S. administration, came and he talked Ukraine out of signing the agreements, trying to achieve a strategic defeat of Russia in the battlefield. Well, in the end, new territories found themselves under our control. The Russian army advances every day along the whole edge of the battle area. Look, they encouraged into the Kursk region. Well, they lost 76,000 troops there. It's a catastrophe, it's a disaster. 76,000. In the end, we drove them out from that region, but they started to create threats for us along the whole border with Ukraine in two neighboring regions. You know, they lack personnel, and now we have to create a security zone along the border. And they divert their troops there, the troops that they are lacking in other areas. 47% is the current staffing level of their combat units. In fact, they lose their combat worthiness. With their own hands, they extended the battle lines for another 2,000 kilometers. And as I said, they started to create threats for us along our border and another 1,600 kilometers. They spread their troops thinly. From the military standpoint, it's silly, it's stupidity. They create problems of their own, and we have to respond somehow. You said that there are some other territories. Yes, of course. Look at the national border. As I said, they incurred into the Kursk region, and they committed a lot of crimes there, including crimes against the civilian population. And we kicked them out with significant losses, and now we have to create security areas along the borders because they keep attacking from there. They use artillery, they use UAVs.
How deep is the security zone?
In
the Sumy region, it's about 10 to 12 kilometers, in some places 8 to 10 kilometers, and then there's the city of Sumy, the regional center. But we do not have this task of taking Sumy, but I do not exclude this. I do not rule this out. Now, why are we doing all this? Well, because they're creating threats for us. They keep shelling our border areas, our border regions, and this is an outcome of their ungrounded and ill-thought-through actions. The only objective was of political nature, just to demonstrate that they can do something, that they can obtain something from their foreign sponsors. And look, they've gotten some $250 billion. Well, not enough. Give us more and more and more. And one half is being stolen, if not more. That's why we found ourselves in those regions. And again, this is an outcome of the standoff and the nature of it.
Well, first of all, I never doubted that that would be the answers. And it's not just that somebody is trying to harm someone, or that someone is trying to tell others something good and nice and pleasant. No, it's not about that. And that brings us to the very beginning of our discussion, when I was saying that global changes happen organically, just like the sunrise. And that's what it's all about. You were saying yourself, Russia and China are shaping the new world order. Well, we are not trying to break or destroy anything to build new. We are not causing any difficulties to anyone. And our colleague from China was just saying that friendship between Russia and China is not against anyone, any other country. And that's the truth. We are simply giving shape to the things that evolve naturally in the world, and they are going to evolve anyway. But bending your knees under the pressure of someone who is trying to preserve the outdated rules means staying behind and overcoming all the challenges, any kind of challenges, be that tariff wars or sanctions. Overcoming those challenges means moving ahead. And we are friends, we are partners with those countries who are willing to move ahead. And those who are ready for it, those who are ready to accept this challenge.
In a previous answer about Ukraine, you mentioned the nuclear aspect of Ukraine in a very subtle way. To be honest, I've read some reports, most of them are in Russian media, that there is an assumption that Ukraine might opt for using a dirty bomb against Russia. Do you take these reports seriously? Do you have intelligence that support this kind of probability?
Well, first of all, that would be a colossal mistake from the side of those who we call neo-Nazis operating on the territory of modern-day Ukraine. And potentially that could be their last mistake, because the nuclear doctrine of the Russian Federation, both the common sense and the practice of our actions, always shows that we always respond and react to any threats that are posed to us in the spirit of reciprocity. We always react, always in the spirit of reciprocity. So our response would be extremely harsh and most probably catastrophic in nature, both to the neo-Nazi regime and, unfortunately, to Ukraine itself. I genuinely hope that it will never happen.
From the tone of your answer, I can conclude that you take these reports
Seriously. Is there evidence supporting these reports, like intelligence, evidence?
No, thank God we do not have any evidence of such intentions, but we proceed from an idea that in some crazy imagination of some crazy person, that kind of ideas may emerge. And I guess I have provided an exhaustive answer regarding our potential response in this case.
President Putin, you're taking some notes on that, and I would add one aspect, if you allow me.
Мы все записываем,
I'm taking note of everything. We record everything. Don't worry about that. Don't even doubt it. I can assure you that every single step taken is well taken note of.
Am I in trouble?
Well, I'm sure you'll be able to overcome those, and we will assist you in doing so.
In Western media, there are reports saying the following, and I leave the opportunity for you to comment on that. Actually, the Iran war is a good thing for Russia. A, oil is up. B, the West has one more problem on its table to take care of. And three, Ukraine is on the back burner. So all the news is on Iran rather than Ukraine. How do you comment on that? And what do you say for those who are saying that Russia is unreliable ally because it did not step up for Iran?
Those who promote such narrative about Russia not being a reliable ally are provocateurs. They provoke the situation, and this won't help them. They won't reach their goals. Every conflict is like any other conflict just on the surface. But as the former Minister of Defense rightfully stated, and the theoretician on military conflicts and military operations, my distinguished colleague, President of Indonesia. By the way, we published his book in Russian on military art. You know, every single country has its own responsibility for what's happening with it. Now, about Russia being reliable or non-reliable as an ally. We've heard that we are supposed to show some solidarity, and this is very true. But Each conflict is unique. Let me emphasize that Israel has more than 2 million people who came from the former Soviet Union or Russia. In fact, Israel is almost a Russian-speaking country today. And clearly, in our most recent history, we factor this in. Now, traditionally, we've had very good, friendly, and trust-based relations with the Arab world and Islamic world, because about 15% of the population of Russia are Muslims. So Russia is an observer in the Islamic Cooperation Organization. It's another important factor. We have to consider both factors. Now, we have established some friendly relations with Iran. And in this connection, we always fulfill all our obligations. And the same is happening in terms of relations between Russia and Iran. We support Iran in its struggle for its legitimate interests, including the interests with respect to peaceful uses of the atomic energy. And this has always been our position. This is our principled position, including in this conflict. It has never changed. And those who claim that we should have done more, well, what more? You know, starting some military operations or what? I mean, we already engage in military operations against those who we consider to be opponents of the ideas and concepts we promote. And those who create threats for the Russian Federation. And those are basically the same forces, be it in Iran or, in the case of Russia, somewhere hiding behind the scene. You know, these are not those who engage in actual combat, but we have some obligations, and we uphold Iran's right to peaceful nuclear energy, and not just with sheer words. Despite the complicated situation around Iran, we built a nuclear reactor in Bushehr. We established a contract to build further 2 nuclear reactors. And despite the difficult situation, despite some danger, we continue implementing the project. We do not evacuate our personnel, our staff. Moreover, in this case, based on the kind of relations with Israel we have, and thanks to the restoration of our relations with the U.S., we put this issue on the table for Israel and for the United States, stating that we perform our mission in Iran being guided by our understanding of Iran's right to peaceful uses of atomic energy. And we act in strict compliance with international norms, and we ask that security of our personnel be ensured. And the Prime Minister Netanyahu agreed to this. And President Trump promised to support our legitimate demands. Isn't it support of Iran? I think it's direct support. Besides, we took a very specific position in the UN, and our position, including in the UN, and I'm deeply convinced of this, is aligned with the interests of both Iran and the State of Israel.
I would say probably enough with geopolitics. One more question before we move to economy and other issues about AI and... Sorry?
Well, we'll stay until morning if we continue the discussion like this.
The forum this year
coincides with the 80th anniversary or commemoration of the Day of Victory, the World War II. Are you concerned that we are heading into World War III in any way?
It does concern me. And there is no irony about it. This is no joking. A lot of conflict potential is out there, and it's growing. Right next to our borders, there is one conflict that directly affects us. I'm referring to the conflict in Ukraine. Now, see what's happening in the Middle East. And clearly, we're very much concerned with what's happening around nuclear facilities of Iran. We're very much concerned with the possible implications and outcomes. And definitely this requires not only very much attention on our part, but also we need to seek solutions to those situations and peaceful solutions along all these lines. And again, I'm very candid here, and that's why we're here, by the way.
Mr. Putin, I listened very carefully to your speech, and you mentioned investments, but it wasn't that clear about foreign direct investments. Where does Russia stand on that? Where do you stand on that? Do you still care about foreign direct investments? You see that as an opportunity, as a burden? I mean, help us understand where Russia stands in this regard.
We absolutely believe that private investment is exactly what we need. And I guess without private investment, Russian economy would hardly be able to successfully develop. And that is fully applicable to foreign direct investment as well. And there was a whole number of investors who've been doing business here in Russia for a very long while. Well, we never forced them to leave. We were not pushing them away. We were not evacuating them. Many of them decided to leave on their own with major losses. But our attitude in this regard remains unchanged. Yes, investment potential of our economic operators is fairly large, but undoubtedly we very much welcome any kind of foreign direct investment. I would say major capital investment of the first quarter of this year amounts to 8.7%, and I know what was happening on the platform of this forum during those days. I know there was a whole number of discussions during various sessions where well-known problems were discussed, certain tension caused by the high policy rate, and risks that those investments level will not stay until the end of the year. But none of the way, the Central Bank of Russia proceeds from an idea that lending to the real sector of the economy would stay at the level of 10 to 11%. We'll see what will be the outcome. I very much would like those numbers to stay on this level, but foreign direct investment is something that we undoubtedly very much welcome. It's not that we just welcome it, but we are also going to create every possible term to make this environment favorable and comfortable for our partners. Here in the room we have our friend from the Kingdom of Bahrain, and if we are to look at what Russian Foreign Direct Investment Fund is doing, they already have an agreement to make some early steps in this direction. They're not too big, just 15 billion rubles. Those are the first projects of the kind, but we are also working very closely with the United Arab Emirates. That's work done by RDIF and the Sovereign Wealth Funds of Saudi Arabia, of United Arab Emirates. Our partners and our friends have taken this decision a while ago, several years ago actually. They choose to trust their Russian partners, and automatically, and I'd like to emphasize that, they automatically co-invest into those projects that Russian Direct Investment Fund chooses to invest. They automatically invest 10%. They co-invest with us. This is a token of great trust and we value it very much. And then they keep raising their share of investment. Well, feel free to talk to Mr. Dmitriev, who would be able to name the exact numbers, but we're talking about many billions of US dollars. Obviously, there are other sources of investment and tools for investment available. There are virtually no limitations to the particular areas where the investor may choose to put their capital in. And this is one of the key areas that I believe we should focus on in cooperation.
Having said that, there are two trends that I realized talking to Russian businessmen, either here or back in my country, UAE. There is kind of rejection of buyback. You know, when the war happened, there was some foreign investments that were bought by Russians, and now these might want to buy back their investments. Russia seems to be blocking that because new Russian entrepreneurs bought and invested these operations. The second trend that I realized is that people are a little bit worried about nationalization. There are some nationalization efforts taking place within Russia. I read about one of the airports being bought back or even taken by force of court from the Russian owners. So how do you see these two trends impacting the rebound of the Russian economy?
Well, as for nationalization, obviously nationalization cannot possibly have a positive impact on the growth of the Russian economy. We are fully aware of it. The case that you referred to, I guess you're talking about Domodedovo Airport in Moscow. Well, I'm sorry, but all the fuss around this particular airport has been going on for a while. It's not that this dispute emerged yesterday. No, it has been in place for quite a long while. It's been in place for many years, and the final outcome of that was this very court decision that you referred to. But it has nothing to do with nationalization. It was a court decision. Nationalization process is described by law, and we do not apply this law. We do not apply those norms, and I've been saying it repeatedly at my meetings with the business community. All I'm saying is that in the course of privatization, there was a whole number of mistakes and unfair steps made. We know cases when something that would cost millions would be privatized for 1 ruble. But in terms of social justice, that was by far not the best type of privatization. But an even worse decision would be to try and take it back now. So my view is that we do need to elaborate the right regulatory framework regarding limitation periods for events like that and close this issue once and for all, once and for good. That is why the comments you've made, the two trends you referred to. Well, first of all, there is nothing like deep privatization or nationalization happening. As for the potential buyback options to be used by our partners, well, there are some aspects that we need to pay attention to. Number one, we need to understand how exactly those partners were leaving Russia. What were the terms? If some of those companies or investors were leaving due to political reasoning under the political pressure of the elites of their countries, that means that those partners are not really reliable. They put the companies, the teams of those companies in a very difficult situation. They could have lost their jobs, but it didn't happen because Russian companies have taken over. They would fill in the niches made vacant. And in this regard, frankly speaking, decisions of the kind have actually contributed to a better quality of the Russian economy, a certain restructuring of the Russian economy, because Russian entrepreneurs were becoming owners of those companies that choose to left. However, if there are legally binding documents that are agreed on by the partners, and if those legal documents do foresee the buyback option, well, then there is no other way but Russian companies have to comply with those requirements. We want to make sure that relationships are reliable and stable. That has not always been the case, which is why I've given an instruction to the Russian government. They're going to act on that, and I request the members of the Russian parliament to support those suggestions once they are elaborated and presented for hearing. But I do believe we need to make a comprehensive decision regarding comeback of those Western companies who are willing to come back to the Russian market. We have to support all the initiatives that favor us.
A colleague of mine from South Africa said that imports of Russian vodka are about to happen to South Africa. Well, you know what? It's a most important and proper step. Why? If you have some vodka, you've got to chase it down with something. And obviously, meat supplies will follow. Or grain imports would follow. I mean, together with our friends from Bahrain, we plan to establish a hub to support imports of wheat from Russia. And let me remind you that Russia is #1 in terms of wheat exports. And a lot of countries of the Arab world are very keen to have our wheat. So step by step, this is where we're going to proceed. As to energy, yes, of course, we have a lot of opportunities here, including nuclear energy. And in this connection, let me remind you that Rosatom is undisputable world leader in nuclear energy development. And I think they build 22 units across the world. This is the highest number that far outpaces all our competition, be it the US, Japan, or any other country. And we consider this opportunity. We are considering joint work in our partner countries, including in South Africa. So, yeah, there are a lot of good and promising areas for us to tap. Well, I'm not talking about hydrocarbons, of course. This is goes.
There is no doubt that more vodka will help the world to put the mood in a better condition. Mr. President,
at any rate, it's going to be more fun to live, right?
I will go back to the tensions in the Middle East, not from a geopolitical perspective, but from an oil-related aspect, which is the supply shocks expected in the market due to the Iran-Israeli war taking place. Can Russia step in, or your capacity is constrained by sanctions and limitations?
I think I did mention, what do you mean, do something or deal something?
Can you step in, I mean, to mitigate the supply shock in the market due to the events in the Middle East? Can Russia do something about that if this happens?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. It's not about us. It's not just about us. We strictly follow all our agreements reached with our friends and partners under the OPEC plus framework. And those countries limit production and supply of energy sources to the markets. But now, based on our agreement, the production is growing very slowly, and I stress it, slowly and steadily, in order not to upset the global market. The idea is to ensure a balance between demand and supply and fair prices that will be comfortable for both producers and importing countries.
Конечно, мы видим, что сегодняшняя ситуация на Ближнем Востоке,
We do see the current situation in the Middle East related to the conflict between Iran and Israel has resulted in some price hikes, but our experts believe that this hike is not very significant. It's like, what, $75 per barrel? It used to be $65, like $10 differential. And this is where the price stuck. Many countries, including the Gulf countries, can increase supply and production significantly. But again, as a rule, we do this in a concerted manner, and this is how it will happen, I hope. And the UAE and Saudi Arabia is very particular about this. And again, our decisions are well balanced. Altogether, we'll look at how situation would unfold. As of now, there doesn't seem to be any need for any immediate response or action.
The latest sanctions on Russia aimed at the so-called shadow fleet, how this will impact the supply to Asia and other places in Africa, how it will impact Russia, how it will impact your friends as well.
Вы знаете, дело в том, что наши недоброжелатели, они изыскивают постоянно способы нанесения нам экономического ущерба.
Trying to find ways to harm us economically, but they suffer themselves. You mentioned energy sources. Our experts, and not only our experts, but Eurostat as well, came up with the following numbers. The losses that the Eurozone sustained due to rejection to buy our natural gas, the losses were to the tune of 200 billion euros. 200 billion euros. And we see that the prices are rising across the board. Now, as to the shadow fleet, our Chinese friend came up with a very good definition. Wherever and whenever somebody's trying to hit us, so this is where we get stronger. Why? Well, because we always find a response, we always find a solution. We talked about tariffs. We mentioned tariff policy. Trade between U.S. and China accounts for 20% of global trade. And under the current conditions, when debt is rising in the global economy, and that has reached the level of 300%, and obviously this affects everybody. And any attempt to hurt us, including through the attempts to hit our so-called shadow fleet, well, these attempts would trigger problems across the board, and primarily for those who are trying to make our lives miserable. Well, because this ultimately would affect the global prices and would impact the countries that are trying to impose such restrictions, because they are key consumers, and will find markets for us.
It's a very interesting tone in this answer. Let me ask you directly. This is my last question before I give 1 minute for each esteemed participant to finish or to say some final thoughts. There are enough reports out there, credible reports, that this war is killing the Russian economy. Your inflation rate is very high. Your interest rate is very, very high. Your growth, by the best optimistic scenarios, will not exceed 1.5% this year. Is this war killing your economy?
Во-первых, долг не растет. У нас один из самых низких в мире.
Debt is not rising. Our debt is among the lowest in the world.
Что касается убийство российской экономики.
As to the economic growth,
В свое время известный писатель говорил,
as
значит,
one author once said,
слухи о моей смерти сильно преувеличены.
you know, the rumors about my death are
Смотрите,
greatly exaggerated.
у нас в позапрошлом главный показатель это же
You know, the key indicator
рост ВВП,
is
темп роста ВВП.
GDP growth.
В позапрошлом году рост
In
ВВП в России составил
2023, the
4,1%.
growth rate was 4.1%.
В прошлом году
Last year, it was
4,3%.
4.3%.
Общемировой рост,
And the global
если мне
growth,
память не
if
изменяет,
my memory serves me right, is
3,3%,
3.3%, which means that we grew faster than the world average.
Соединенные Штаты росли
The US had
2,8%,
2.8%
а
of growth,
еврозона вообще
Eurozone
0,9%.
0.9%.
То есть очевидно, что
So,
Россия совершенно
clearly,
точно добивается
Russia
хорошего темпа и прогресса.
is demonstrating
А
good
если
progress
вычистить
and is
из этого
demonstrating
все,
good
что связано
pace.
с углеводородами,
If
то
we
рост у нас будет еще
discount
выше.
hydrocarbons, the
какой?
growth
В позапрошлом году
would be even
7,2%,
higher. It would be 7.2 last year.
прошлом почти 5.
I'm sorry, 2023, and 4.9 last
Но
year.
это не самое главное.
But this is not the most important thing.
Приятно, но это не самое
It's
главное.
nice,
Что
but it is not the most
важнее?
important
Меняется
thing.
структура
What matters
российской
is that the
экономики. Вот это самое главное.
composition of Russian economy is changing. This
В
is
структуре,
key.
вот, роста ВВП
And
43 с лишним процента.
43+% in the GDP is a non-oil and gas
Даже не
sectors
оборонные.
and not defense.
Вот у нас значительная
sector.
часть роста сосредоточена в основном
The majority of our growth
в основном промышленном секторе.
is
Даже не
ensured
связанном
by
напрямую с оборонкой. Я
the
говорил
industrial
это
sector
в
that is not related
Вы знаете,
directly
что
with the defense
нас не может
sector.
не радовать?
One
Вот
thing
я считаю, что это вообще ключевая
that we're
вещь.
very happy about
Мы все время говорим
is as
об
follows. We keep
импортозамещении.
talking about
И
import
действительно выделяли
substitution,
солидные
and indeed we've
финансовые
allocated
ресурсы на то,
significant
чтобы
financial resources
замещать
to
те продукты, которые
substitute
которые
the
с нашего
items
рынка ушли
that
в силу и санкций,
are no
и
longer
ухода
available in our market due to
западных
sanctions
компаний.
and due to
В
withdrawals
настоящий
from Western
момент
companies.
происходит очень позитивный момент,
And now we're
который
witnessing a
заключается в
very
том, что у нас
positive
всё
kind of
больше и больше
developments.
появляется продуктов,
We see more and more
основанных на
products and items
собственных решениях,
that are
собственных
based on our own
платформах,
solutions, that
связанных
use
с
our own
развитием науки
platforms
и высоких технологий.
that are related to
Вот
the
этот
development of
объем
science and the high-tech sector.
этого
Now,
продукта постоянно
the share of
увеличивается.
such products
И это говорит
keeps
об изменении структуры российской
expanding, and
экономики.
this
Это одна
means
из
that
наших
the
ключевых
composition of our
целей,
economy is
задач.
changing, and this is
Вот,
one of our key objectives, one of our
промышленность
key
растет
tasks.
еще
The industry
большими
is
темпами,
growing
чем
at a
ВВП
faster
страны.
pace
И,
than the
в
GDP,
прошлом году,
national
по-моему,
GDP,
это рост
and
был
last year I think the growth was around 7%, 7.2% for industry. In Q1 of 2025, it's 1.6 to 1.9, and this growth continues. And this is happening against a backdrop of very low unemployment. It's at historic low. It's 2.3%.
Да, конечно. Платы за
Indeed,
такой резкий рост экономики,
the price for such tremendous growth of economy and the growth is very high. The price is inflation, in fact. But the central bank and the government taking necessary measures and efforts, including with respect to the policy rate, and obviously you witnessed the discussions unfolding in the government and between the government and the central bank. Indeed, there are no simple solutions here, but overall, we have been able to address this issue too. But inflation is in single digits. It's like 9.6, right? Madame Nabiolina would nod, right? It's around 9.6%. Some claim that the baseline inflation is already 5%. Well, I've been loaded with numbers over the past 2 days trying to explain to me where those 5% came from. But anyway, the Bank of Russia believes that by the end of the year we're going to have like 7 to 8%. I think it's going to be 7%. This is what I hope for. And this means that the measures taken by the financial authorities of Russia yield positive outcomes. indeed, there are many issues that we need to address. And the head of Sberbank is smiling, is nodding. Well, why not smiling? I mean, his margin is 5.7%, whereas major Western financial institutions would have a margin of 3.7%. This is pretty good performance. Yes, in the banking sector, we also have some things to focus on. But overall, our situation is stable, reliable, and I count that it will persist this way.
President Putin, this is the second panel I had the privilege and the honor to have with you in less than 1 year. I can't be more privileged. Thank you so much. You've always tolerated my questions and, really a testament to your belief in open dialogue. Thank you so much, esteemed guests. Thank you. And everyone, thank you so much.
Dear friends, dear colleagues, allow me to express the words of gratitude to our moderator. And very genuinely, I would like to express my gratitude to all of my colleagues who have participated in this panel session. I am sure that it was exciting to follow for the audience here in the room and far beyond. I'm very sure that many of the words expressed today will be quoted by international media outlets all around the world. Thank you so much for having candid and open conversation. And many thanks to all of the participants of the panel session who have been able to stand in line with the degree of heat and tension that we experienced. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being so open and truthful.